Which animal is the most profitable? This question is asked by thousands of players, yet the internet lacks a clear answer. Or rather, it did, because now you have the answer right in front of you. However, compared to crops, this matter is a bit more nuanced. To ensure everyone understands how these calculations were made, this video will have 3 sections. The first section will discuss each animal, where you'll learn things like at what age it's most profitable to buy and sell each animal, whether it's worth replacing older animals with younger ones, plus many other tips and interesting facts. The second section will present the ultimate theoretical ranking, and the third section will feature a tier list considering the practical challenges of raising each animal. The most important thing you need to know from the start is that profitability will be calculated per hectare. For example, in the case of chickens, we'll calculate how much you can earn from eggs by feeding them grain harvested from a 1 hectare field. The crop yields per hectare are based on my previous video, where I analyzed crop profitability. Check it out if you haven't seen it yet. Also, subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, as forestry and factories will also be covered. Let's start with chickens. Barley is the best choice because it provides the highest yield per hectare compared to other grains you can feed them. And of course, we're aiming for the largest amount of feed possible. Interestingly, chickens, regardless of their age, consume the same amount of feed. For 10 chickens, this is 50 liters per month, or 5 liters per chicken. However, the number of eggs increases until they reach adulthood at 6 months, at which point the output matches the feed input. 1 liter of grain yields 1 liter of eggs. My first tip regarding chickens is that it's not worth selling them to make room for new ones. Young chickens consume the same amount of feed but produce fewer eggs, and constantly selling them is unprofitable and a waste of time for transportation. The second tip and interesting fact is that roosters are entirely useless. They consume the same amount of feed as hens but don't lay eggs, nor do they affect breeding speed, which wouldn't benefit us anyway. So, having one for decorative purposes is fine if you like, but keep in mind that this decoration will be a regular cost paid with grain. As for profitability, the calculation is straightforward. Since 1 liter of grain equals 1 liter of eggs and a hectare of barley yields 18,960 liters, you simply multiply that by the highest egg price I encountered, 2,520. This gives a profit of over 47,000 per hectare. Let's move on to something a bit more complex: sheep. There's something about them that really surprised me, leading to additional experiments. But let's start from the beginning. When it comes to feed, the choice is straightforward: grass or hay. There's no difference in yield. It's exactly 86,300 liters. There's also the option of grazing on a pasture, which provides 100% feed efficiency. But for the sake of profitability calculations and comparisons, I didn't account for this. I'll consider grazing only in the practical ranking. Compared to chickens, young sheep consume less feed than older ones. Specifically, up to the 5th month, their consumption increases monthly, and then it stabilizes at 500 liters per month for 10 sheep. The most surprising discovery in all my experiments was that wool production in sheep increases until they reach 18 months of age. Only then does it stabilize at 600 liters per month for 10 sheep. Interestingly, you can't purchase sheep that are already this old, so it's logical to conclude that replacing animals is entirely unprofitable. I ran additional calculations to determine the optimal age for purchasing sheep, but the answer depends on your budget and timeline. If you want to start earning as quickly as possible and have the funds, buy the oldest sheep available. Now, let's talk profitability. Compared to chickens, the calculation is slightly more complex but still manageable. Assume you have only sheep aged 18 months or older, let's say 10 of them. They consume 500 liters of grass monthly. Divide this by the grass yield per hectare, then multiply it by the amount of wool they produce. This gives you the amount of wool produced per hectare, a substantial amount, but we'll discuss the details in the practical ranking. For now, multiply this by the highest wool price I've seen, and you get over 226,000 per hectare. And remember, this is just from a single harvest, whereas grass can be mowed multiple times per year. Now let's move on to goats. Here, the game developers either showed some laziness or reflected reality, as their feed consumption mirrors that of sheep. It also increases until the 5th month, after which it stabilizes at 500 liters per month. However, when it comes to milk, things are different. Milk production increases until goats reach 16 months of age, after which which it stabilizes at 250 liters per month for 10 goats. Unlike sheep, you can buy goats that are already 16 months old, meaning they start producing milk at maximum capacity right away. Still, as with sheep, it's better to raise only fully grown animals at maximum production, as feed consumption increases until month 5, while milk production grows until month 16. For profitability, the calculation is the same as with sheep, simply substituting wool with milk and using its respective price. Interestingly, the profitability turns out to be slightly higher than that of sheep. Again, this calculation is based on a single grass harvest, but remember, you can harvest multiple times a year. The simplest animals, requiring only one type of feed, are behind us. Let's move on to something more challenging: horses. Here, the choice of feed ingredients is sorghum, hay, and carrots. I conducted several complex calculations which showed that to produce feed in the proportions specified in the enclosure, we need to divide a 1 hectare field as outlined on the screen. This results in a total of over 25,000 liters of feed. Of course, this is theoretical. No sane person would divide a field like this, but it allows us to compare profitability with other animals. Horses grow until the age of 36 months, at which point they reach their maximum value of 5,000. After this, their age increases, but their price remains unchanged. By the time they reach this age, they will consume 10,811 liters of feed and produce 1 offspring, which I sold immediately to determine the amount of feed consumed by a single horse. To calculate profitability, divide the feed yield per hectare by the amount consumed by 1 horse and multiply it by the horse's value. I don't subtract the purchase price of the horse from this amount because the horse gives us offspring during this time. By maintaining a steady cycle, you won't need to sell or buy new animals unless you stop raising them because you don't feel like riding them. Horses, like other animals, produce manure when provided with straw, but we'll compare which animals benefit most from straw later in the video. Now let's discuss pigs. Dividing our theoretical 1 hectare field for their feed works as shown on the screen, resulting in over 17,000 liters of feed per hectare. The price of a pig increases systematically by 100 per month until it reaches 2,500 at 24 months, where it caps. During this time, a single pig consumes 1,274 liters of feed. In addition to their rising value, pigs produce both manure and slurry. As I mentioned earlier, we'll address manure later, but as for slurry, you'll get 1,456 liters per pig by the time they reach 24 months. As with horses, I won't consider the cost of acquiring new animals because while pigs reproduce quickly, animals in Farming Simulator reproduce steadily. Each animal produces 1 offspring. This allows us to maintain a large pig farm and continuously sell only 24-month-old pigs, maximizing their value. Assuming this scenario, the calculations are similar to those for horses. We divide the amount of feed consumed by 24 months by the feed yield from 1 hectare, then multiply by 2,500, which is the value reached at 24 months. Additionally, we can sell the slurry. Assuming we sell it at maximum prices, the total profit per hectare amounts to this much. Of course, this assumes selling slurry and not offspring, which might be inconvenient, but we'll discuss this later in the video. Moving on to animals that have been in Farming Simulator since the beginning: cows, specifically dairy cows. When it comes to feed, there are 2 options: a mix of silage made from corn and hay or silage made from grass and hay. The latter yields 86,300 liters, which is the grass yield per hectare. For the corn silage and hay mix, the field must be divided into sections to achieve a 75% silage to 25% hay ratio, as TMR can be made in these proportions. We use more silage because corn silage yields more per hectare. If we consider seasonal growth, the grass-based mix is preferable. Straw is a good filler but not required, and mineral feed is primarily used to operate the robot, a sort of fuel, but we'll discuss that later. Regarding profitability, cows present a unique challenge. They begin producing milk at 12 months and this output remains stable. However, their feed consumption increases until 18 months. Since you can't buy 12-month-old cows, we'll focus on milk production with cows older than 18 months. At this stage, they consume 3,500 liters of TMR TMR per month and produce 500 liters of milk per month per 10 cows. Additionally, they produce 2,500 liters of slurry per month, which, like feed consumption, increases until they reach 18 months. Under this scenario, we calculate the amount of milk produced using feed from a hypothetical hectare. For corn silage, the yield is this much milk, while for grass-based silage, it's this much. This translates into the following profits plus the value of slurry, bringing the total profit. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to share them in the comments. Let's move on to water buffaloes. The situation is similar to dairy cows and mirrors the dynamic between goats and sheep. Their feed consumption follows the same formula, as does slurry production, which stabilizes at 2,500 liters per 10 animals. Milk production begins at 12 months for water buffaloes, but in their case, it amounts to 300 liters per month per 10 animals and remains unchanged afterward. Thus, we simply substitute the amount of milk and its price in our calculations to determine the profitability of water buffaloes per hectare. The results are surprisingly high. It will be interesting to see if this is nerfed in future updates or if it remains as is, possibly to encourage players to raise water buffaloes, given they're a new addition to the game. Beef cattle are not new, as they were already present in Farming Simulator 22. For calculations, we approach them similarly to horses, but with one significant difference. Unlike horses, beef cattle start losing value after reaching their maximum price of 3,500 at 36 months. However, it's worth holding off on selling them until the 37th month, as they will give birth to a new calf valued at 92, while their price drops to 3,458. This results in an effective profit of 3,550 over 37 months, considering the added value of the offspring. By the time a cow reaches its maximum price, it consumes over 15,000 liters of TMR and produces 7,094 liters of slurry. Performing calculations similar to those for horses yields a profit of over 31,000 per hectare using TMR made from grass silage, and just over 22,000 per hectare when using TMR based entirely on meadow forage. Now let's address manure, which I've avoided discussing so far. For every animal that produces it, the manure and straw usage stabilize at a specific point. For instance, beef cattle stabilize at 3,000 liters of manure produced from 1,300 liters of straw after reaching 18 months. Dividing one by the other allows us to rank the efficiency of straw usage for manure production across all animals. From this ranking, pigs are the least efficient, while water buffaloes are the most. Interestingly, water buffaloes consume the same amount of feed and straw as dairy cows, but produce significantly more manure. This discrepancy is curious. That said, if you have animals in straw, it's always worth using the straw to produce free fertilizer. This ranking is simply an interesting side note. Let's now summarize profitability rankings based on the revenue per hectare discussed earlier. At the bottom of the ranking are horses, which, much like in Farming Simulator 22, remain the least profitable. At the top we have goats, which dethrone sheep for the #1 spot. However, sheep are still extremely profitable, trailing just slightly behind goats. In third place are water buffaloes, thanks to the very high price of their milk. This may change in the future, but for now that's how it stands. This ranking is based on TMR production using corn silage. If we consider grass silage and multiply it by 3 or even 4 harvests per year, the podium remains unchanged since the top 3, goats, sheep, and water buffaloes, all rely on grass. Theory is one thing, but practice often tells a different story. Let's take a look at the animal ranking considering practical aspects. One thing is clear: horses are the least profitable and the least practical. Each one requires daily riding and cleaning, which collectively takes a lot of time, and the profits are minimal. If we're going from the bottom of the table, next to last would be beef cattle. The profit isn't particularly impressive, and you have to wait a full 36 months to reach the maximum price at which it's worth selling the animals. Once that point is reached, they must be loaded onto a trailer and transported. In reality, if you wait until the 37th month for the birth of another animal, there must be space in your pen for it. This adds a layer of complexity to managing the space, ensuring all newborns fit while avoiding having a half-empty barn most of the time. Additionally, it's not enough to simply provide feed. You have to mix it first. This makes the process less quick and convenient, as you must carefully monitor the proportions. Sure, there's the large barn with an automated feeding robot, but in that case you also need to store straw, invest in mineral feed, and let's face it, it's all extremely expensive. I'd rank pigs about equal to beef cattle. While they take less time to reach maximum value and the profit per hectare is higher, new pigs are born very frequently. Effectively managing the pen and maximizing profit is a real challenge, if it's even possible at all. Even though pig feed doesn't need to be mixed, it requires a lot of ingredients, and you must carefully calculate the quantities to achieve 100%, which is no small task. Additionally, acquiring all the necessary ingredients requires a variety of equipment. Moving on, I'd place dairy cows slightly higher. They generate less profit than beef cattle, but the issue of managing space is eliminated, as the focus is on milk production. It's even more beneficial to keep the barn fully stocked at all times. Selling milk is also hassle-free. You just pull up and load it within moments, with no stress involved. The only real challenge with dairy cows is mixing the feed, which can be time-consuming when dealing with large quantities. However, you can invest in the aforementioned expensive barn with a robot, though that's a debatable choice. I'd love to hear your opinions on this in the comments. I'd place chickens on par with dairy cows. While they generate more profit and require only a single type of feed, which can be quickly loaded from a silo, collecting the product eggs is a major hassle. There are just so many pallets. Personally, and from what I've seen, I don't know anyone who enjoys loading pallets, or who can do it quickly and efficiently. That's why I've rated chickens this way. To avoid repeating myself, I'll reveal two cards at once. I'd rank sheep and goats equally in second place on the practical table. Like chickens, they only require one type of feed, which, in the form of hay, can be easily stored in a silo. Even better, they can achieve 100% productivity without being fed at all, as they can graze on grass. So once again, there are no complications when it comes to feeding. However, just like before, there's the issue of pallets. To earn the hundreds of thousands I calculated earlier per hectare, you'd have to load and unload hundreds of pallets, which, at least for me, would be a nightmare. What's unfortunate is that goat milk can't be loaded into a tank and transferred to a tanker. It's only available in those dreaded pallets. Nevertheless, both goats and sheep generate huge profits, so second place is well deserved. However, first place undoubtedly belongs to water buffaloes. Although you need to spend some time mixing their feed, you earn significant profits from their milk. Best of all, selling this milk is quick and easy. You just load it into a tanker. This makes it relatively simple and fast to make money. As I mentioned earlier, the price of water buffalo's milk is extremely high, so it might be reduced in the future. If that happens, I'll let you know on Discord, along with any other changes to profitability. The link is in the description. To wrap up and reward those who've watched until the end, here's a fun fact, or rather the result of an experiment. There's no difference in the breeds of animals. For example, when it comes to dairy cows, Brown Swiss and Holstein have exactly the same economic performance. I intentionally skipped bees in this episode because they don't require feeding, so I think they'd fit better in a video about factories. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. See you soon.